Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Once again we're back on the farmyard and we've got a few problems with it. To bring up to speed, we finished the model, all seemed good, took it to Wood Springs, flew it really well, it seemed to be alright on the 20x8. We thought we'd try a 1910 just to see if we get a little bit more performance out the engine, let it rev a little bit easier. Only managed to get one sort of half flight with it, so I couldn't really tell. But the one thing that we did notice, and a couple of what I'm going to call Zenoah experts noticed, was that the engine, you could tune it on the ground, but as soon as it went up in the air, it went rich. That was put down to the balance port on the diaphragm, getting differing static pressures from different pressure probably created within the cowl. So the suggestion was to put a pipe onto that hole and then route it into the fuselage so that it was seeing more static air rather than varying static in the cowl. I also thought that we needed to fit a trumpet, which you can see is currently fitted, and this would be to aid the airflow into the carb to make it more, make things atomize better, because there was quite a bit of fuel, raw fuel, coming out of the carb, and you could see it down the side of the fuselage, down the cowl. So after Wood Springs, we brought it back to the field, thought we'd go and fly it, and we couldn't tune it at all. Spent all day trying to get it to run right, and we just couldn't get it to run right at all. It had run better without the cowl, so that said to me it was airflow around the cowl. We came home, we fitted the balance pipe to the diaphragm plate, and we fitted the trumpet. Went back up the field again, it ran a bit better but not great. And then on one flight, well, the last flight of that day, I was flying it, and halfway into the flight, the engine just suddenly, instantaneously went really, really rich, as in it wouldn't probably go past third power. So it was let's call it an emergency landing. Slightly misjudged it, came into the long grass, pulled the undercarriage out, done a little bit of superficial damage underneath, but that's easily repairable. But it has made me think, what on earth is wrong with this carb? So that's brought you up to speed. What the plan is now is some more fault finding. This is a brand new Zenoah 38. If the carb number, the WT number on this engine matches the same carb on that engine, this carb's coming off and it's going to be going on that engine. Ultimate worst case scenario, if that doesn't work, is take that engine off, swap the carbs back and put that engine on to see if there's any difference. After that, toys might be thrown out the pram and we have to come up with a different plan. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to start taking things apart, swapping things over, and see if we can get something to run. But I'll stick you on time lapse for that. Alright, so I don't know how much you would have seen from that time lapse. I think I probably put the camera in totally the wrong place. But what I've done is this carb is the original one from here, and this carb is the original one from this engine. This is a brand new engine. It shouldn't have seen anything other than factory running if there's anything done. Everything appears new on it. So changed everything across, checked inside the internal carb filter, nothing in there really. I did give it a squirt out with brake cleaner just to make sure, but everything's changed over. I found that this bell crank arrangement was a little bit loose on its mount, so that changed the throttle response a little bit. So I've changed that, tightened it up just a fraction. Still moves, but just tighten it up a fraction. So now the only thing to do is to get the prop on and try running it. You might be able to see that there's a block missing from here. I'm just going to take that off the cowl, super glue it back on. Also, that took a bit of a bump during the last landing arrival, but it's nothing serious. So I'll get that glued on, and at the next opportunity, get it outside and run it up and see how good this carb is. I'm fingers crossed that this is, I'm hoping this is going to cure the problem. If it is, great. We can then go and enjoy this model, and then I can figure out that carb. What I'll probably do is get a full rebuild kit for it, and strip it down. Probably even get myself an ultrasonic bath to give it a clean out properly. The one thing that's running through my head is on that last flight it suddenly went rich. Now we had to have the needle, the high end needle, out a long way to get it anywhere near tune, which means it's getting a lot of fuel through. If it suddenly goes rich, that means to me then something's unblocked and it was having more fuel flowing through it. But I couldn't, when we ran up the ground, it was still giving us exactly the same performance before it went sick like that in the air. So I'm really not sure. So best case scenario is this carb cures the problems we're having. We can tweak it and tune it just a little bit, and it runs brilliantly. After that, we need to dig a bit deeper and figure out why we've still got the problem, different problems, whatever, with that actual engine. So then it would possibly be a case of swapping that whole engine with that one and putting the original carb back on it, so on and so forth, to see if that engine gives us the same problem. It shouldn't, because these engines, they're magneto engines, they're all self-contained. It's not like there's a separate ignition or anything. If that's the case, I'm going to have to really think hard about what is going to be causing the problem there. Have we got a crack in something somewhere? Is there a gasket letting air by? I'm not sure is the answer, but it'd mean a lot of digging and delving to try and find out what's going on. But anyway, that's where we are with this. I'm going to get that block glued on, and then so the next opportunity, get it outside running. It's a bit late in the evening just now to do it, so hopefully tomorrow or something like that. Right then, it's the next morning. We have literally just taken this engine outside and put it back in. What did we do? Well, a little bit of a dribble of fuel in it just to get enough fuel through, just to test it. It was only going to be a quick 2-3 minute run. Went to fire it up. Because I didn't know where the fuel was, I had my thumb over the trumpet like this and was turning it over. When I was doing it, I thought, why am I feeling a puff of air on the back of my fingers when turning it over? We think we might have found the problem. I don't know how well you're able to see. I'll bring you in. I think there's an air leak in there between top of the crankcase and bottom of the crankcase. That might be giving us our running problems if that gasket has let go. So the carb, we did actually run it, and changing the carb over from the brand new engine hasn't made any difference. So what we're going to do is, as we speak, Ewan has got a brand spanking new Zenoah 38 with the old carb off this one fitted. It's on the test bench, and we're going to run that one up quickly, and that should prove whether or not the carb is the issue or the engine. If that engine runs perfectly fine, it's not the carb causing the problem. I am leaning towards this, but to fix it, it means taking this whole engine off, getting a new gasket, taking this whole engine off, getting the mount off the back, splitting the crankcase, new gasket on, old gasket off, new gasket on, bolting it all back up together, so on and so forth. And as soon as that cures the problem, I'd like to keep this engine with this model and use the brand new engine on something else. But it's bugging me now that I can't get this to work properly, so I'm determined to get it fixed. Okay, so we're a little bit further ahead with the fault finding on the Farmyard. We have now introduced a third engine, a third carb, and we might have got to the root of the main problem with this engine. So what have we done? We've got a brand spanking new engine on the test bench outside. We have tried the carb from this engine on there, exactly the same problem. Mm-hmm. We tried a different third carb off that engine on it, exactly the same problem.
Yep.
So straight away that says to me the carbs are not the root cause of the problem. So what we've got to think about now is what is affecting the fueling that isn't the carb. So for shits and giggles, this bit here is the insulator block. I'll bring you in and try and show you a bit better. Okay, so on the engine, you've got that pulse port. That pulses through this to the carb and has to go in there, which then in turn comes through to here. My initial thought was, oh crap, dropped it. These, I don't really you can see, I've got like two passageways through them. My thought was that means the carb, because there's two there, the carb can be fitted either that way or that way. So on the engine, I didn't know if there was two ports here. Anyway, I'm babbling on a bit. What I'm getting at now is that we've got to the root of the problem where the carb has been fitted arse about tit. So the carb has been fitted, let's get this right. The carb's been fitted that way, and the carb should be that way, so it sees the pulse port. So, to prove a point, what we've got to do now is put this back together with this, one of these carbs back on, but not connected to the throttle, just have it on in the opposite direction to make sure this engine runs as we expect it to. And then we can see about getting the throttle linkage made up again. So we're going to get this back together and do a quick test. Right then, not quite sure exactly where we left you, but I think it was, we'd said that we needed to redo the throttle linkage. We found the root cause of the problem. The carb wasn't getting its pulse from the crankcase. The way to resolve that on this engine was to rotate the carb at 180 degrees on its insulator block, which meant then putting a new throttle linkage in, and that is all done. I'll come back to a fix I've done or thought of in a minute. So we've rotated everything round, done new throttle linkage, test run it quickly.
Yep.
Hell of a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Cal is now on it because I'm confident that it's going to run brilliantly now. It's not the trumpet, it's not the diaphragm static pressure that it's looking for. All we need now is some weather to go and test fly it. There was a chance that we might be able to do it tomorrow, but the wind's from totally the wrong direction. So as soon as we can get out and test flight, we will. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mentioned about another fix. The insulator block has got 2 channels for the pulse, and it's basically set up so depending on where the port is on the carb, it always sees it within a certain rotation, if that makes sense, a certain orientation. Because these crankcases only have 1 pulse port, it's only going to be on one side of that insulator block, so it would only work with the carb in one way. The carb port will only see that pulse in one orientation. We had it the wrong way around. We've now fixed that. What I've done on that 38, which had exactly the same orientation, but we didn't realise there was a problem because it seemed to be running all right, is I've taken the insulator block off. On the engine side of that insulator block, I've milled with a Dremel the channel to come all the way around to the other half of the channel. So it's now, instead of 2 separate channels, it's one
U-shape.
It's like a U-shaped channel. They're joined up. So it doesn't matter which way round the orientation is of the carb, it should still see a pulse port. Which does mean that engine should run better, even though we didn't realise there was a problem with it. If it does, that's going to have silly amounts of power now. And this engine should now release a lot more power. We noticed when we were just doing a quick test run, it was pulling a lot harder, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it could go even better with a different prop, the one that's on the stump. Yeah,
potentially. This is a 1910. This was a trial to see if we could get more performance out of the engine before we realised there was a problem with it. So yeah, we're going to leave this video here, waiting for this to go on test fly. I'm sure at some point we'll report back with how it performed and what we found when we test flew it. If you're enjoying this sort of content, give us a thumbs up down below. If you're not already, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you tick the bell, you should get notifications when we put new videos up. But from myself and Ewan here in the workshop, we'll see you next time.
Bye.